Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
evening, and I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Commission. The Planning Commission meeting is being broadcast on 27 and it's www.youtube.com. The agenda materials. I'll read. Please note.
Commissioner Funke,
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding.
Aye.
Commissioner Lau, Commissioner Patel, Commissioner Sayason.
Aye.
So everyone's present. What's my cue here? You don't have to-
You're looking for someone to move to adopt the agenda.
Oh, okay. I'd like to ask for a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
staff may have a voice vote, please.
Commissioner Funke,
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding.
Aye.
Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Lau, Commissioner Sayason.
Aye.
The vote passes with 5 ayes. Are there any members of the public or any commissioners who would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? I think you'll start a clock. You have 30 seconds for members of the public to do so. Are any members of the commission who would like to remove an item from the consent calendar? No commissioners who want to do so?
Ten seconds. Thirty seconds has elapsed and no one's raised their hand.
In that case, with no one wishing to remove an item, can I please have a motion to adopt the consent calendar as presented?
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Staff can have a voice vote.
Commissioner Funke,
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding,
Aye.
Commissioner Lau, Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Sayason.
Aye.
Vote passes with 5 ayes. Next, moving on to oral communications. Any oral comments on items that are not on the agenda can be called in by calling the teleconference number in the next minute. And the number to call in will be displayed on the screen. And any Zoom participants who wish to make oral comments on items not on the agenda should raise their hand to indicate to staff they would like to commission on items that are not on the agenda. And staff, please set a timer for 1 minute. Yes, you would like to, yes, please go ahead.
My name is Jamil Munir. I served as a planning commissioner for almost 20 years. And there are some items that we were still working when I left. So I just want to bring that up. Number one is housing element. What's the status of that? Is anything is done on that? The other part was the general plan. And we worked on that for a very, very long time. And I don't know what happened to that. So those are the two critical items that when I left that were not done. And I'm wondering what's the status of that.
Well, the housing element has been under work for a while. May I ask staff to address these items?
Sure, real quickly. Normally, we don't discuss items that raise a public comment, but this evening, we'll certainly can take care of that. Housing element was adopted by the city council last week, and we did receive our certification letter from the state verifying that we are in compliance with state law. So
That's a very good news.
yeah, it was, we're pleased to get that. We're only the second city in the county that's received that approval so far. So we're pleased and proud of, again, thank the commission for their time and effort and staff for all the work they put into that. And then the general plan update has been on hold and will be on hold until the Baylands process is completed.
That brings up the issue with the Bayland. Is there going to be a project called Bayland in our lifetime? It's been, what, 20 plus years? So when it is in hold, can we keep the general plan on hold for that length of time? Or we should move forward and don't wait for the Bayland project, because we don't know what's going to happen to that. And I haven't seen any further progress on that. They had the office here in downtown and it's closed now, so I don't know whether they are still interested in doing this project. If they are not, I suggest that we should move forward with general plan. And I will be more than happy to help in any way commission desire.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Have we received any other?
There's no one else
Public?
wishing to speak from the Zoom.
So we have received some communications from the public with regard to the item that's on the agenda tonight. They were largely supportive. Are there any other written communications we received that have not been sent to the commission yet?
No.
Okay, in that case, I would like to ask for a staff presentation on tonight's agenda item.
All right. Good evening, Commission. The project before you this evening is for design permit and use permit approval for a new mixed-use development at 25 Visitation Avenue. The requested permits for a design permit are for approximately 4,000 square foot mixed-use building that contains a single-family dwelling with attached ADU and a ground level storefront space.
Can I ask you to speak just a little bit closer to the microphone?
Yes,
Thank you very much.
right by my mouth. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. It's required in the NCR02 district for any new principal structure. A use permit is also required to allow the mixed use per the NCR02 district standards. Additionally, a use permit is requested to modify the off-street parking requirements for this project, which are 3 off-street spaces, and the project proposes 2. So an overview of the existing conditions on the site. This property is just under 2,700 square feet in size. It's developed with a 1-story commercial building, last occupied by the 23 Cafe. It's adjacent to the 23 Club, a well-known structure in town. Both structures have been vacant for several years and are currently in a state of poor repair. Due to the age of the structure, the city did hire a historic architect to complete a historic resources evaluation to ensure that the project would not be impacting a historic resource. The evaluation is attached to your report, and it did find that while some criteria were met, ultimately it did not meet all the required thresholds to be designated a historic structure. Other than the 23 Club, other adjacent development include a single-story mixed-use building at 27 to 31 Visitation, with a residential unit occupying the part of that building closest to the subject property. And Per the survey submitted with the project plans, the existing building on the subject property actually encroaches a little bit over the property line toward that structure. And then at the rear, there's a vacant parking lot at 36 to 50 San Bruno Ave. All those sites are zoned NCRO2. Here's some photos of the site and surrounding development. Again, this probably a very familiar structure to most of you, right next to the 23 Club building, which is shown here on the left. Subject property in the middle, and 27 to 31 visitation on the right. And here's some additional views. These photos also show there is an existing approximately foot or so distance between the structure at 27 to 31 visitation and the subject property. And again, the existing building on the subject property does encroach a little bit over that lot line. So there's some separation between the two already. And here's a view looking up visitation. It shows the mix of uses and buildings. You have heights ranging from 1 to 3 stories. You have standalone residential, next to standalone commercial, next to mixed use. So again, as you well know, this is our mixed use district. So the project proposal includes at the ground floor just over 700 square feet of commercial storefront space. A two-car tandem garage is proposed to serve the single-family dwelling. And again, 3 spaces are required by the code because the single-family dwelling is over 1,800 square feet in area on a lot that's 25 feet wide. There would be a new curb cut to serve the new garage. There's currently no curb cut in this property's frontage. Due to the location, it would displace 2 on-street parking spaces. Additionally, on the ground floor, there's about a 500 square foot ADU associated with the single-family dwelling. The residential entry is located to the right of the storefront entry. So as you can kind of see at the bottom of this photo, there's the entry corridor. The commercial unit would have access to the rear yard and corridor. There's also secured bicycle parking in the rear yard, as required by the code. And the second floor of the structure would be solely occupied by the single family home, which totals about 2,500 square feet in area. So several findings are required to approve the use permit, both for the use itself, as well as the requested parking modification. So those are detailed in the agenda report, and I'll try to summarize them here. In terms of land use, the mixed use is consistent with the neighborhood and compatible with surrounding development. The density is about 16 dwelling units per acre, so it's actually at the pretty low end of density for mixed use projects in the neighborhood. Infill development is consistent with a variety of housing element policies. And the building is articulated to ensure compatibility with adjacent uses. Related to parking, strict enforcement would not be required to enforce the parking conditions on the site, considering the garage would be used by occupants of a single dwelling. It's not a multi-tenant situation. Allowing 2 off-street parking spaces where 3 are required for a 2-bedroom home on a site that's close to public transit and with secured on-site bike storage wouldn't contribute to an existing shortage of on-street parking in the vicinity of the project. Displacing 2 parking spaces is obviously something that can't really be avoided if any parking is going to be provided on this site. So that's just something I want to emphasize, whether they're providing 3 spaces or 2, those street spaces would be eliminated. And finally, the narrow lot width does constrain the ability for any project to provide both required off-street parking and the required storefront space, which in the NCRO2 district, as you recall, is 600 square feet minimum of storefront area. All of those competing uses are challenging to provide on a 25-foot wide lot. In terms of the design permit, Those findings also can be met as detailed in the staff report. Findings related to neighborhood compatibility are largely addressed by the use permit findings. In terms of building design, the building is a contemporary architectural design with pedestrian level details and articulation at the street facade, consistent with the NCR2 district regulations. There's a variety of second level decks, canopies, light wells, balconies that help to break up the overall massing and add visual interest. The proposed color palette is, modern mix of white, gray, and black. There's a mix of materials, stucco, cement board siding, glass, metal framing. All of these come together in a cohesive and harmonious fashion in compliance with the design permit findings. There is a pretty significant amount of landscaping proposed for such a small lot in this district, about 25 square feet of landscaping in a planter box adjacent to the storefront entry. So again, giving that kind of softening of the pedestrian level facade. And then a rear yard of just under 500 square feet. That would be available for the residential and commercial uses. As the chair noted, you did receive a lot of written correspondence on this item, some of which was attached to the report, others were provided to you after the report was published. And I'll end my report here. Staff is recommending conditional approval of the project per the conditions and findings contained in the resolution. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. At this time, do any of the commissioners have any questions for staff on what was just presented?
I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Julia, we've done a couple of approvals for mixed use projects on Visitation Valley. On Visitation. And one of them was a storefront and it also had residential and they was going to put a lift in there. Is this something that, and for that project, did we decrease their parking requirements or?
So there's actually two recent projects on Visitation that use lifts,
Yep.
Mechanical lifts. One is just across the street from this site at 18 Visitation. They provided 4 parking spaces using mechanical lifts, so 2 spaces on top of another 2. And that actually did comply with the requirements for that project. In fact, it was 1 extra. It was the requirement 3 and they provided 4. Yeah, so that particular project didn't need a use permit or request a use permit for modifying the parking. The other project at 213 Visitation, a couple blocks up, also provided 4 parking spaces using mechanical lifts, but their requirement was 5. So they did get, you all did approve the use permit to reduce their parking requirement by 1 space. And that was a 4-unit project. They also requested a smaller commercial storefront than required. So the requirement is 600 square feet. They provided like 280. And then 18 Visitation, I can't recall offhand, what did they provide 600 square feet? Like 400, I think. Yeah, so those other 2 sites that provided compliant parking or that you approved a use permit for parking had storefronts that were less than the requirement, which you also approved as part of the design permit, but just that was how they accommodated the parking.
Oh, what should I do with it? Oh.
Oh, yay.
Any follow-up questions, Commissioner Patel,
No, thank you.
from the response? And I'll just go down the line. Commissioner Gooding?
As to the, first, thank you very much for a very, very thorough written report. I really enjoyed having a lot of information available. Thank you. As to the projects, the other projects on Visitation that were multi-use structures, have any of those been completed?
I believe that the 18 Visitation has a building permit issued. Do you want it? And they've broken ground at 18 Visitation. 213, you all actually just approved their extension in January.
Yeah.
And I think they said at the time, the property owners, that at this point, the project they needed to wait to build until market conditions get a little bit better for like construction loans. I think at that time interest rates were like super high, but they were confident. They requested the extension because they were confident that at least in the next 3 years through the extension that they would be able to pull a permit and break ground too.
Does that cover them all, or is there?
Those are the only two I can. Oh, sorry. Are you thinking of the senior project on San Bruno?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. My other question was, my understanding is that the parking requirements differ between multifamily dwellings and single-family dwellings, which this would be characterized as a single-family dwelling. So would the parking requirement be any different if this were denominated as a 3-bedroom residential unit as opposed to a 2-bedroom unit?
Like a 3-bedroom multifamily unit?
Well, if this is being called a 2-bedroom unit, if it
A
were
2-bedroom single family.
right, if it were a 3-bedroom unit, would the parking requirement be any different?
A 3-bedroom single family home of 2,500 square feet in size would not have, on a lot 25 feet wide, would still have a 3 parking space requirement. So for single family homes, the requirement is mostly square footage based, although there is some, anyway. But yeah, mostly square footage based. And for multi-unit development, it's based on bedrooms.
And as far as the storefront piece of this, which I realize is required by our zoning arrangement or structure, we don't really have much experience as to whether these little storefronts are being utilized or occupied. Is that fair to say? I
think that's fair to say. I do not know offhand some of the development like that occurred in the mid 2000s, for example. Like I think in the 300 block of Visitation, we had some development that had potentially smaller storefront than 600 square feet. And I don't know offhand if those are occupied, but certainly we don't know for 18 Visitation, which isn't built yet, and for 213, what those occupants will turn out to be.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have for staff. Thank you very much.
Yes, I had like 2 questions. Thank you for the report. I also greatly enjoyed the historic resource evaluation. That was very interesting. I think it was mentioned in this report, but will there be any change in the setbacks to the adjacent properties?
So compared to the existing conditions?
Yes.
Yes, so the existing structure per the survey that was prepared does encroach a little bit. Sorry, I don't recall offhand. It's, I think, a foot or less over the shared property line. So with this project, demolishing the structure and then constructing the new structure, it'll bring the building back further than what the current building is from that shared lot line. So it'll correct a non-conforming condition to that extent. And then in the NCR2 district, a 0 front setback is permitted, and that's what they're proposing with the new building. And the rear setback is a minimum of 10 feet at the rear. Because the lot line is diagonal, it actually is like between 10 to 15 feet, I think. So
is there any change between that small gap between the property and 2731?
Yeah, so yeah, because the existing building on the subject property encroaches a bit over the line, by correcting that encroachment, the gap will be a bit larger. So the structure at 27 Visitation obviously is going to remain where it is, stepped back, I think, at least a foot from the shared lot line.
And my other question was, I don't know if was there any consideration for, well, I guess that would be when they apply for the permits and the design, like for a solar,
That's a requirement under the building code. So, and I believe the plans may show the proposed location of future solar.
Thank you.
Commissioner Saison?
Yes, thank you. Julia, I had the same questions as Commissioner Patel, and but I kind of want to give a visual to the folks at home and also the applicant because I wanted to follow up on that. So, can you put up 18 visitation?
Yeah.
I believe just to show kind of what it looks like. I think it's at page 52 of their application.
So, let me
Let's see the front
minimize that.
of the building first. I think it's at page 52.
Okay. Not seeing that, but let
yeah,
me,
52
do you
is
want to
the-
look at
50
this?
is the
Yes.
inside of 25.
Oh, okay. Am I confusing it? Okay, yes, that. Okay, so that's what that looks like. And now can you turn to the parking system so we can have an idea of what the lift system looks like?
So this up here is the ground floor plan. So for this site, which is also 25 feet wide, driveway comes in. They actually proposed or are building a turntable so cars could turn. And then the lifts are located right here in the back.
Okay. And at 213 visitation, so
Mhm.
we have that I think at page 135. We have a photo of that.
I have the floor plan. Did you want a rendering?
Yeah, just to get an idea of what 213 visitation looks like.
Okay, so here's a rendering showing the project at 213 visitation, which is also a 25-foot wide lot. So same
And-
10-foot wide garage.
And their lift system that they implemented or are going to implement?
Oops.
I think it's that page 134 of that application.
So this here, I don't know if you can see my cursor very well. I don't have a laser or anything. Oh, I do have a laser, but will it work here? No, I have to do it like this. Well, whatever. I think you guys can tell what
Okay.
Thank you. I think you guys can tell. So this is the ground floor plan. So entry through that single car garage. And then they've placed their parking here side by side. They provided some turning diagrams to show that the cars could actually make I think a 3-point turn to exit out nose first.
Right, and so this project required us to grant a use permit because it needed to provide 5,
That's right.
and it provided 4. And I think, I remember this project, and I think we weighed the fact that because it was providing 4 units, and I think it had to shrink the required storefront size from 600 square foot to 283, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we discussed that and agreed that they couldn't really squeeze any more from their storefront to provide the 5 parking spaces. So that's why I think we granted that use permit. Is that correct?
I can look at the findings again for that particular project and see what the specific findings were.
Okay, that's okay.
You're probably correct.
Okay,
But-
that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay.
Any other comments from any other commissioners? In that case, I think would like to invite the applicant, if there's anything you want to add to what was said or to the materials you provided, you're welcome to do so.
Good evening, Honorable Planning Commissioners. I'm Joel Diaz. Been a resident of Brisbane for 25 years. And just want to respectfully ask that you approve the project. I think everybody agrees we're in desperate need of housing, and this is an attempt to provide much needed housing. The parking situation is reduced, but also so is the bedroom count. And if using those stackers or the lifts are in some cases kind of problematic, and they're not super practical. They do, you know, physically allow you to have more vehicles, but I'm not sure about, having not used them, I'm not sure about how readily owners are going to actually want to use them versus maybe just parking somewhere else. And there's an extreme cost tied to that. And so if we were going to do stackers, we would also want to have probably more bedrooms kind of thing too, to sort of offset the cost of that. So that would be kind of sort of part of our cost benefit analysis, I guess. And so we thought, you know, hey, let's just do a little bit smaller, less rooms, a little less parking. We get a nicer store. I do have plans for that store to use it. I don't intend it to stay vacant. I don't really want to say what I want to do with it, but we do have plans, and that's kind of why we wanted it that size for our use. And if we did not, then we would probably want to have either more living space. The garage itself isn't of a lot of value, you know, having, and kind of because of the dimensions of the lot, the 25 feet, you're kind of locked in it's very limited to what you can do. And you guys probably are well aware of that. So it's really hard to make it flow nicely and be attractive and usable with all of those factors that have to be factored in. And, you know, we do want to have something nice that has a lot of value, and just having a big garage doesn't seem to add a whole lot of value, because you can even really get a lot of storage, because backing out, you know, you have to have room to back out, and it's just, we don't want to make it hazardous either, you know. So we just are trying to make it, we're just trying to strike a balance, I guess. And that's kind of why we came up with that. I think that, you know, there's always room for improvement. So happy to answer any questions or discuss any or explore any ideas. Also have my architect, Bill Guan, here tonight as well at your disposal to answer any questions. So if that's it, that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant from anyone on the commission? Anything to follow up on?
Yeah, I have a couple questions if I can. Looking at the floor plan of the residential level, there's sort of the middle room that's called a study. And it does have a closet, am I correct?
I believe it does, yes.
What is to prevent this from becoming a 3-bedroom occupied unit?
It's really small if you look at the dimensions of it. And I think if we were going to just declare it a room, we'd reconfigure things to make it a more decent size. It's really small. I mean, it's really more of a den. And yeah, it could be, and somebody could, in theory, live there in sort of very tight space. But it's feasible, but it's not our plan, and that's not the intent.
It looks like it would be about 11 by 11. Is that about right? That's my thumbnailing of it.
I know my architect would probably know better the dimensions.
Well, I do have the floor plans through the chair if you wanted me to put them up.
I'm looking at the floor plan, and it looks, my guesstimate is about 11 by 11. But that's, if the architect has a different impression, it would be useful. My concern, and why I asked the question, is because as a 2-bedroom, we're being asked to reduce the parking requirements from 3 to 2 for a 2-bedroom unit. In the real world and in our real world experience, you know, a 3-bedroom unit is going to generate more vehicles than a 2-bedroom unit. Just you know, spitballing it. And that's one concern I have about this, is that particularly since the room has a closet. You know, in the realtor world, if it has a closet, you can call it a bedroom. If it doesn't have a closet, you can't call it a bedroom. And this markedly does, and it could easily be marketed once our permit process is done and once it's off our screen as a 3-bedroom unit. What would prevent that from happening?
If I can speak, yeah. So I don't think the intention is to subvert any ordinances. I think the spirit of the state and everybody is to actually stop focusing so much on parking and more on just actually approving projects and getting things built. And that's been the problems historically, is that cities have just sort of made it very challenging to build and focused solely on parking. And a lot of different cities are really moving away from that, and designers and planners are looking at like no parking. And we hear about these 15-minute cities and all these things. And so the idea is to, I think, to really not focus on the parking, because when we do, it makes it super prohibitive, especially on these 25-foot lots. And although there is possibly a workaround with the stackers, I think like if you have a 50-foot wide lot, you've got a lot more flexibility, a lot more ability to provide that parking. And because we are in close propinquity to, or nearness to the buses and the Caltrain station, it seems like this would be, the kind of project that should benefit from a reduced parking requirement, or at least be seen in that, with that lens. But if we do apply the maximum parking requirement to this project, then it seems fair to just have more bedrooms, to get that sort of return. And like I said, we were just trying to strike a sort of a happy balance kind of thing. But I think if we focus on parking, that's what would happen, is when we'd start to look at getting more bedrooms and getting a bigger building, kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, as far as your intention or your vision, do you envision you building this yourself, or is this intended for resale with plans approved?
So that's the plan. I'm a general contractor and builder. I've built many homes in Brisbane over the past 25 years, and I would be building this. I do want to live there. I do want to have a store there. It doesn't mean that couldn't change, with maybe some financial scenarios didn't work out for me. Hopefully that's not the case, but that is the plan for me to live there. I really like that location. I've lived on Visitation before when I first moved to Brisbane. I think it's a great location. It's fun. It's warmer. It's less windy. You get to see all your friends. And so I'm looking forward to it.
What do you see as your timeline for, assuming this were approved, for getting it done?
As soon as we can get the permit, start this year, maybe 3 months to get the permit, I think is reasonable, and then break ground right away.
Thank you.
Anything from any of the other commissioners? Commissioner Patel?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Lai?
No, just curious, like, on a project like this, what would be the anticipated, build time and amount of, impact, to visitation or disruption, to the area with the construction?
I think we're going to take, because I have access from the back, most of our access will come through that direction. We'll probably have up a fence, like you see construction with a coming soon kind of sign, that type of fence in the front. And it's probably going to take about 8 months. I've done them as fast as 6, but probably 8 is what I'm hoping.
So you wouldn't anticipate very much impact on visitation itself, probably?
No, yeah, it would be much easier to come from the back. We don't have any pedestrians or anyone to contend with.
And that's accessible through that vacant lot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Sison, any other thoughts, comments?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we now invite other members of the public to call in or raise their hand on Zoom, and you'll have 2 minutes to do that, and staff will set a timer. Oh, yes, please approach.
I strongly favor this project, couple of reasons. One is the need for the housing in the state of California. This particular project will provide some. Plus the Brisbane, historically, look at it, we always have the shortage of the housing. If you look at the housing element, you can probably tell looking at that. Secondly, the visual impact. If you look at that particular street, everything is built haphazard, and I regret myself approving one of the project right across from there at the corner. I don't know what happened to me at that time that I went along with that project. So first thing I look at this one here, I said that visually is going to fit in and also is going to improve the street scene. And looking at that particular design, I will say that it definitely will. And as far as the housing needs, it will provide additional housing. And I think Brisbane always had the problem meeting the state housing requirements. And more of these kind of projects we approve, better off we will be. And I strongly suggest that any further project in this particular street, we should see that the design is conformity with the rest of the projects, but don't look at the historical design that's been there. Some of the projects that are there for a number of years, some of them are like back in 1970s or earlier. And at one time at the Planning Commission, the idea was that we want to keep the uniformity. We want to have the projects similar to the others. But if you look at the other projects that are there existing, if you follow that, you will destroy the entire Brisbane beauty, that particular street. So I think the project that Mr. Joel Diaz is proposing, I think it will be a step in the right direction. And I think planning should keep in mind in future applications that come of that sort, these kind of elements should be there. Don't follow the historical design, which we did. And up to this point, I regret why I approved that project. So I really suggest that this project be approved. And some of the technical stuff like parking is always the issue in Brisbane ever since I started back in 1990. I've still been struggling about parking. There's nothing you can do in this city. There was a proposal to build a parking structure in the city of Brisbane because people were always complaining, but that didn't go very far either. So whatever this project is providing, in my opinion, is adequate. And if there is no such thing as perfect parking in city of Brisbane, there's no way you can do that. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Has anyone dialed in on Zoom or?
There's no one on Zoom, and the slide has been up for about 3.5 minutes. We can give a grace period or move on at your.
Well, the 2 minutes have elapsed, right?
More than
So
2.
I think we can close the public hearing.
Through the chair, you'll need a motion.
For that?
I move to close public hearing.
I'll second.
What's that?
I move to close public hearing.
I'll second.
Thank you. Second, can we have a voice vote on that, please?
Commissioner Funka,
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding.
Aye.
Commissioner Lau, Commissioner Patel,
Aye.
Commissioner Saison.
Aye.
The resolution passes by 5 ayes, with 5 ayes. And I think that this opens our deliberation period. Are there any deliberations, comments that we have not surfaced yet?
Yeah, I want to say a couple things about this. This is a site that obviously, a lot of folks has a lot of nostalgia about, and I think we acknowledge, if nothing else, by the absence of a lot of other public comment on the issue, that the structure itself is not terribly useful for the purposes that everybody feels very, very warm and fuzzy about in our past, and that's in a way a shame, but time marches on. My issues with the existing project and the proposal is about one issue, about the number of bedrooms that this unit may represent versus the parking issue. We all know that we need housing in Brisbane and Calgary. The three main issues before the state are housing, and housing. And I get that. And I don't think we need to belabor that. However, every time you add a residential unit, you have an impact on the existing neighborhood and the existing people and the existing businesses that already are there. This construction is going to entail the removal of 2 parking places for the garage cut. And the project proposes, instead of the 3 parking spaces that the zoning ordinance nominally requires, only 2 spaces. So it's a dead wash. It makes no improvement to the parking situation. In theory, it doesn't harm it. Whether a tandem parking arrangement is really going to be utilized by 2 cars, hard to say, but on its face, it is only a 1 space reduction from the requirement. Fine. My 2 cents worth is that I would like to consider some conditional requirement of our granting of a permit to ensure that the unit does not become more intensively used than as a 2-bedroom unit. Because we all realize that the more bedrooms you add, the more cars you add. That's just the real world. But that's my concern, and I would, if anybody else, echoes that concern and we have any consensus on that, perhaps we can look to staff for some way to bake that into the granting of the permit. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, so as I understand, the main concern is about potentially more intensive use than is written into the plan right now, and the impact on parking potentially. Commissioner Patel?
I would just echo those concerns. I think that, I think we're taking 2 public spots away from, 2 public parking spots away. So those are never going to be used by the public. So I don't think it really is a wash. I think we're losing 2. And I think that if it is a 3-bedroom, we're going to lose more than 2 because people that are living there are going to be they're going to be parking on the street. So it's going to be more than 2 spots that are lost by the overall public for this one project. And the thing that I'm concerned about is I think that in the past, we have made a big deal about parking, especially on visitation, and that the people that have been planning those projects, they knew that we're going to make a big deal of parking, and that's why they put the lift systems in, that there is a way to alleviate this whole parking issue. It's just not being utilized because I guess they don't want to. So if there's a way to fix it, and they can have 4 spots or 3 spots because there's a system that's in place that makes it so that they can, then why are we waiving that requirement?
I wonder if I missed that. You referred to like a way that the parking situation can be alleviated. What am I missing there, or what is that?
So we had talked about there were two other projects on Visitation Valley. They had lifts placed into their project that would double the amount of parking. So here we have 2 spots. They could probably make 4 based on the numbers that we'd seen previously, or at least 3, if they had 1 lift at the end. So then we wouldn't really need to be talking about granting any sort of waivers because they would be meeting the conditions.
Okay, thank you. I understand. Commissioner Lai, any deliberations?
I echo Commissioner Gooding's concerns with the current layout and the concern of, the study, the den, and conversion at a later time, and how that actually will impact parking. I think there will, and you balance all that and the loss of parking with replacing a dilapidated, unit and property for the improvement of our community. But because that garage space might not be utilized, and that's even less parking, and that goes for the same for the other projects. Having lifts there in a narrow spot, that's difficult to navigate, and people are going to kind of go with an easier path and just park on the street. So there'll be less parking for everybody, especially if you have multiple units available. I mean, coming up for multiple projects. So those are my concerns.
Commissioner Saison?
Yeah, so I have the same concerns. Parking problem. We have a parking problem not only on Visitation Avenue, but just Central Brisbane as a whole. if you recall, when we built the new library, residents complained there wasn't enough parking provided for the new library. And recently, the city council held a hearing on whether certain neighborhoods should have permitted parking because we have a parking problem generally in the city. So my concern is to grant a use permit that would reduce the amount of parking required when the applicant can provide the space. And my other concern with granting this use permit is, the applicant has a standard size lot. He has the same size lot that his other two neighbors that were able to provide for parking with the parking lift system. So it's shown that that can be done. Now, he's required to provide 3, he's asking for 2. I don't know if, that would be beyond our, discretion or abuse of it to grant it, because normally, the law is the law. The law says 3 parking spaces. And normally when we grant variances or use permits, it's because the applicant's property is in such a way, maybe configured in such a way that, maybe he has a weirdly shaped lot or whatnot, that to comply with the law, it would be almost impossible or just financially infeasible for him to do. So in that situation, I can see he didn't absolutely need it, but you gave it to him. So why don't you give it to me? We run the risk of then this commission looking like it makes arbitrary decisions and, probably rightly so, that we're not applying the law equally if we deny future applicants the same type of consideration that's being asked by this applicant. So that's my concern.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable concern about setting a precedent. Can I ask staff to comment on that concern, how much of a concern that is if you grant exceptions that it'll make it just sort of inescapable that you should do the same for future applicants who want an exception?
Yeah, I think that's always going to be a practical concern, right? When an applicant comes up and they say this was done in a previous case, but by law, you're making findings on each individual project and circumstance. That is your legal requirement, is to make findings based on the facts of the case in front of you. So someone may make that contention, but legally they have no status to rely on a precedent somewhere else. You're making your determination based on unique facts and situation. But again, the perception, that surely will exist, but factually that's not, or legally an issue.
Oh, and I have one other point regarding what Commissioner Gooding said. So the condition that you wanting to put in about the potential 3rd bedroom, I like the idea, but maybe staff can comment. There wouldn't be any way for us to enforce that, correct?
I cannot think of a condition being placed that would say, annually the property owner shall let an inspector on the premises to inspect the floor plan, right? I do not think we would have the ability to impose such a condition. That would be impractical. But as it relates just generally to enforcement of the code, I think if it were to come up in, say, future resale of the property where, it was observable to any member of the public that it was perhaps a 3-bedroom property, not a 2-bedroom property, then yes, the city could and has in the past enforced whenever kind of information is like publicly available. But no, we couldn't require like regular check-ins or inspections.
Public comment is closed, but I'm okay with making an exception if the applicant would like to respond to anything that's been said.
Thank you. Yeah, so I don't want to do anything that's going to ruffle any feathers. That wasn't the intention here. So I think that, we could just do the stacker and do the 3, and I don't want to have any restrictions on the property either. So, if that's the trade-off, that's okay with us. So, my wife and I. So, we can do that. Just do a stacker, do the 3. And, I didn't mean anything. I apologize. I was just trying to kind of act in the spirit of everything that's changing and in the new legislation. And that's all I was trying to do, but I definitely recognize the impacts and the problems. And I also just don't want the restrictions, so that wasn't my intention. So, you know, if we have to add the stacker, that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Can I
think-
follow
I
up
think-
with you,
yeah.
Mr. Diaz? So, so you're okay with the stacker? So would you be putting in 3 parking spaces, or would you do a stacker that could do 4?
I think we just do 3.
Okay.
Yeah, I think physically that's probably the easiest thing for us to
Okay.
do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I think that, if I heard all that correctly, I think that removes the concerns about parking as well as the risk of potentially setting a precedent.
Well, I guess what we do now is we reject this use permit, right?
The what?
We would have to,
So procedurally, there may be a second option. One would be to reject this and await a second application, or to condition granting on a modification of the project plans. I'm not sure which makes the most sense in the context.
I would suggest that if the applicant is withdrawing the use permit request, he's not asking for a reduction in parking. Whether he achieves it through a stacker or some other means of his choosing that doesn't alter the design materially, we could do that administratively. If he were to do something that changed the design materially, we'd have to come back.
Mhm.
But the idea of how he provides the parking in terms of 3 legal spaces, I don't really know that that needs to be the commission's concern unless it changes the design.
So I lost you. What do we do tonight? Do we
You're-
grant or deny?
You'd be approving the design permit.
Right.
And either the applicant's either withdrawing the use permit for
Oh,
parking, or
Thank
he's,
you. There are 2 permits at issue. That's what I'd lost. Thank you. You're right. One is for the project as a whole, and one is for the conditional use permit for fewer garages.
Correct. There's a use permit for the use itself that would still need to be approved.
So are there in fact 2 separate, I'm having a bit of trouble hearing, but 2 separate things that we have to vote on, basically on the design permit, which no one has an objection to, is that right?
So the resolution that's drafted is for approval of both of the components of the project that require a use permit. For practicality's sake, we only assigned 1 use permit number to it. So I think what probably needs to change is that the resolution itself, you would introduce the resolution with modifications to make it clear that the use permit for approval is for the use itself, and that you are not approving the use permit for the parking condition. But Director Swicky, if the applicant right now, like publicly says, can he withdraw, then we can just kind of, thinking through what this would actually be in terms of constructing the resolution.
yeah, the applicant could withdraw the use permit for the parking modification tonight, if that's his choice. If you want to reopen the hearing, allow him to do that. And then we would modify the resolution to reflect the scope of the actual approval and the request. Or if we went down the path of denying the parking component of the use permit, we would just have to modify the findings accordingly. Probably have to bring it back for another.
That's what I was gonna say.
for a
We may
consent
need to bring
calendar.
the findings back for you guys to approve on consent at your next regular meeting, because as written, yeah, they need to be modified if, anyway, I think the easier thing to do would be for the applicant to withdraw that portion of the use permit application. That's just my opinion. And then we would still modify the resolution, but it's a little cleaner, I think.
And then we would bring that modified resolution back on the consent calendar. at the
That's
next
right,
meeting.
at the June 8 meeting,
That sounds like
assuming
the
that you meet.
That sounds like the cleanest way to go.
I think so.
We don't want to put roadblocks up. We just want a clean process.
I think it would be very hard to come up with, I would have to ask one of you to word the resolution with all the modifications,
And
so,
I'm not sure I can.
yeah. So,
Go ahead, up to them.
yeah, please go ahead.
So, so I just want to clarify. So the matter would come back as a consent item? Is
That's
that what
right.
we're proposing?
If,
if you were to withdraw the the request for a use permit for
for the
parking.
parking modification. And can we not just modify the parking now by adding the stacker? And just make that like a condition of the approval?
The
Well-
difference is you no longer need the parking use permit because you're meeting the code. Right?
Okay,
That's,
so we can just take care of that administratively? Is that what I heard?
Either way, we're going to have to modify the resolution because that wouldn't reflect.
But
your
the plans
project.
don't necessarily need to change. They can approve the design.
Okay,
The same package
okay.
can be attached, except you are withdrawing, well, yeah, how would we do that with the plans, Sterling?
You just condition it that it should meets the
Design permit.
required
Yep.
number of parking spaces.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then that works. That works for me. Thank you. So I will, in light of the matter coming back, a resolution coming back as a consent item, and the parking being 3 spots with a stacker in the same design and to be approved, I would like to.
To
Design
achieve
permit.
that, whether it's by stacker or by other means, staff as part of your building permit processing, is of how you provide that parking.
And as Director Swicky said, that method would have to not materially impact the design of the project. And I do just want to point out that there is some constraint to the floor plan on the ground floor due to the configuration of the commercial space that is kind of dictating the layout of the garage as currently designed. And if there's a change to the commercial space such that you are no longer complying with the 600 square foot minimum storefront, that would be a material change, for example, to the design permit that would have to come back to the commission. So I just want to, I agreed with Commissioner Gooding that the method is not being prescribed, but I just want to point out that there are physical constraints to the solutions if we're going to avoid materially impacting the design.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So that's something totally different. So that than what I understood. I'm sorry. So I don't want to delay the project anymore, and I want to get started before the rainy season comes in October 15th. And I don't want to reconfigure. I intend to have like a cultural market in that retail space, and that's what I need, that space. You know, I thought that we were saying I could just put the stacker in the garage as it's configured. And if that's not the case, then that doesn't work for me.
I don't think it was anybody's intent to say you can't put a stacker. I think our intent was kind of, I want to flip that. I think we don't want to create precedent on this commission that we want everybody to use stackers. There may be other creative ways to accomplish compliance with the parking requirements. We're just leaving that decision to you guys, working with staff with what complies with the parking requirement. That's all.
So yeah, and I totally didn't think.
If your answer is stacker and it flies with them, that's probably fine.
So adding the stacker in the current garage as proposed is what I would like to do. If I have to reconfigure the store, then that's something I wouldn't want to do. So if I know going into this that I have to reconfigure the store, I don't want to do that. So I would rather have 2 spaces and maybe a smaller unit upstairs or something. You know, so that, yeah, because that's kind of a deal changer for me. I really need to have that store space. Because it won't be if I was to reconfigure the garage, my store space is going to get really small like some of these other stores, and it's not really usable, you know, and we were just talking about that. There's these store spaces that are not being used, or at least maybe not as much benefit to the community. So I recognize that we don't want to increase the parking impact, but if we do comply and provide all the parking like these other precedent projects did, we're going to have more residential living space, more people on site. So that was kind of the mitigating trade-off here, is that we're going to have a smaller living space and less parking. But now if we have to do the maximum amount of parking and it's unusable retail space, then the only way financially that makes any sense to do is have to have a much bigger living space. And that's the prohibitive part. That's the deterrent. That's why people haven't been developing visitation and not revitalizing it, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense financially necessarily. It doesn't make sense design-wise. It's this, you end up with this little postage stamp store and not a very usable, very awkward garage. And people don't want to do that. And that's why, like, you see that project at 213, I think they were proposing really large units, you know, because that's how you get the return on your investment. And I feel like that other project references also, those are very large units, and not a usable store. So I was actually trying to do something that was usable, that people would enjoy, that the community would enjoy, and here was just kind of striking a balance. And so now it sounds like I have to go back to the drawing board and sacrifice my retail store so that I can have the third parking space.
That was not actually my understanding of what Commissioner Gooding was saying. I think that there's no, in principle, objection to using a stacker. I actually thought when you first responded to that, you had kind of thought it through and you were happy with that as a solution. And I don't think anyone on the commission would be opposed to that.
Okay.
So that's my understanding. Any other commissioners, please speak up if I'm misinterpreting that.
No, I
Yeah.
agree with you.
If that's what you came back with, and it allowed you to retain the use that you wanted of the commercial space, I think that would be acceptable. And I see all the commissioners nodding.
Okay, great. So we're staying with the same layout, just we're going to have a third parking space
Yeah,
via
it sounded like
stacker.
you'd already thought that through.
That's, I
actually,
mean,
so,
I was
yeah.
okay with that. I was like,
Yes.
okay, well, it's a big expense, but it's worth it because it accomplishes all of the goals for us and for the community. And we want people to go to the store, so it needs to be
Yeah.
fairly big and nice enough.
Yeah, that's great. I think that was the intention of what we were saying, is that doesn't necessarily have to be a stacker, but there's nothing wrong with a stacker, and
Okay.
it meets your needs as well.
Okay.
Mr. Diaz, I just have a quick question. So you're able to do the 3 stacker without raising the height of the ceiling, or how does that?
I was envisioning that's a great question. Thank you. The tandem, and then one of them is a stacker.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know which one it is, but that's what I was thinking, is we'll just stay in that space and then we keep our store size the way it is.
Yeah. I'm curious to know how much stackers would be used, in general, but I think the commission had discussed that already, but I think we have to try. And
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. So procedurally, once again, to return to Commissioner Gooding's original question, I think this application is withdrawn. Is any other action from the commission needed tonight?
Yes, you're still approving a use permit to allow the single-family residence in this zone. So you're approving that, and you'll have to take no action because there's no more parking use permit request in front of you. And we will modify the resolution, bring that back on consent. But you can make a motion tonight to approve the project, which is the use permit, whatever and design permit, absent the parking modification use permit.
Okay, we'll come back at a future date and
The
we will
resol-
then
Well,
approve
you
it.
won't need to see the project, you'll just see the resolution, which is reflecting your final determination. Because again, these changes are all going to be internal to the building, right? For the stacker, you wouldn't need to see those as a commission. You don't.
Right. Well, we'll see the modifications that were made to the resolution on the consent
Yes.
calendar at the next,
Correct.
right? Yeah.
You still need to make a motion second to
I'm-
modify and adopt the resolution, right, with those changes, and then we'll bring it back.
I'm gonna try it.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Gooding.
I believe what is appropriate under the circumstances is to propose or to move for approval of the use permit. One is a demolition permit, which is 2023-DP-1.
That's the design permit. There is no demo
Oh, sorry,
permit.
design
Yeah.
permit, thank you. Design permit 1, that includes demolition. And then to consider the use permit UP-3 to have been withdrawn by the applicant at this time. No?
Sorry, because we assigned one application number to both
Ah,
use permit requests.
okay.
I would suggest that you approve the design permit and approve the land use component of the use permit and take no action on the parking component of the use permit.
Okay.
That's kind of clunky, but it says, I think, what you need to say.
then we'd suggest you add a condition to the design permit requiring the full number of 3 parking spaces be
All right.
required for the project.
So I will move for approval of this design permit and use permit with the findings provided by staff, with the exception that the commission will not approve that portion of the application for modification of the parking requirements, and that the applicant will be subject to compliance with the parking requirements of the code.
May I have a second, please?
I'll second.
All in favor? Or may I please have a vote?
Commissioner Funka,
Aye.
Commissioner Gooding.
Aye.
Commissioner Lau, Commissioner Patel.
Aye.
Commissioner Saison.
Aye.
The resolution passes with 5 ayes. Thank you very much. And thanks to the applicant, and thank you for walking us through it and for addressing our concerns. I really appreciate it.
Through the chair, please read the appeals procedure.
Are there any items? Oh, there's anyone may appeal the action of the planning commission to the city council except where specified otherwise. Appeals shall be filed with the city clerk no later than 15 calendar days following the planning commission's decision. Exceptions to the 15-day filing period include the following. Appeals shall be filed with the city clerk within 6 calendar days of the planning commission's action for use permits and variances, and 10 calendar days for tentative maps and advertising sign applications. An application form and fee is required. To make a formal appeal. For additional information, please contact the city clerk. For this evening, are there any items initiated by staff?
Well, we kind of jumped the gun on the housing element. We were going to announce that got approved. Again, I want to thank the commission for your time and effort on that particular endeavor. And we'll be coming back with you because there are a number of actions that are required in terms of code modifications or other activities to implement the housing element. So I'm sure some of those you'll see in the next 12 months, 8 months, year, whatever, 3 years. So you're not quite rid of the housing element yet. And it always feels like a long time. And I don't believe there's anything else. Just FYI, the comment period for the Baylands or the NOP period is for the Baylands EIR is closing tomorrow. So we'll expect to be receiving additional comments from other agencies, the public, regarding the scope of the forthcoming Baylands EIR. And that's all I have. Anything else, Julia or Jeremiah?
Well, we're very grateful for this, all this, the staff's work on the element as well. Thank you very much. Are there any other items initiated by the commission?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't think I need a motion to close the meeting. Can I use the hammer? All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.